Generally, people have an image, an idea of what the veteran looks like. I've had those moments where I felt invisible because I don't have that look.
I've been told this a lot, like, you were in the service, you don't look like a veteran.
I was in a war. I served my country. I signed willingly. Why can I not be acknowledged as a veteran?
Someone even said that to me today. I don't look like a veteran.
People still believe women are serving coffee and tea in the PX and the commissary, and that we only do administrative jobs.
We're the most visible service member and the most invisible veteran. I don't think we want that anymore.
We need to unite to make us strong. We've been invisible too long.
I didn't realize that there would be such a big difference in a man serving and a woman serving. So whenever I joined, I was very naive to that entire fact. My first deployment was Shark, Afghanistan. And it was hell 24/7. Always getting shot at, always having missiles fly over our cop, something all the time. We really didn't have much downtime, and when we did, we would dream about making it back to Germany and what we would do when we did make it home from the deployment. We had 4 different teams in our platoon. We would rotate. One squad go one day and we would go the next day. Well, this day was our off day, and my squad leader came up to me and was like, hey, we're gonna go on this mission. Basically like a reconnaissance mission where you just go out and check. He was like, but you don't have to go. It's just gonna be a small mission. And I remember telling him, no, if my team's going, then I'm gonna go too. We were on this mission. We came out on Route New York and there was a bazaar. Normally there's, a ton of people in a bazaar because that's where they sell their meats and goods and stuff like that, and it was completely empty. We was in a diagonal formation walking, so I was walking on the left side. I was the second man back. I was coming up on an alley to my left, so I got up and I hugged the building, and I remember seeing some random tires, and I was stepping forward with my right leg. Everything slowed down and paused, and then next thing I know, I was falling to the ground and my ears were ringing, and my first thought was one of my battle buddies was hit. After the explosion went off and I hit the ground, we always carried a tourniquet in our left pants pocket, and I went to reach for it and I came up with nothing but flesh and blood, and it wasn't there anymore. I remember briefly waking up in the Black Hawk. I remember seeing the military medics right there, and I passed out again. I remember briefly waking back up at the Logar province Cop Shank. After that, the next time I woke up was probably in Germany at Longstuhl. Walter Reed was pretty phenomenal when it came to their medical care. I was one of, I think, 2 female veterans out of all the wounded vets there. I remember waking up in the ICU, and my mom and dad got there at the same time. The military flew them out there, and I remember just the look on their face. It was definitely traumatizing, just as traumatizing for them, I believe, as it was for me. Me and my dad was actually in the hospital room, and I was laying in the hospital bed, blown up, beat up from war. At first I wasn't paying any attention to the news, and he's the one that told me, He said, Kendra, listen to this. Females can finally fight on the front lines.
A historic announcement today on U.S. defense. Women will now be able to serve on the front lines. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta made the announcement today.
And I'm laying there completely blown up. I wonder, like, well, what was I doing then? You know, females are just now being recognized for being on the front lines, and what was I doing? I almost felt like what I did wasn't recognized. Whenever you get to leave, they put you into, like, I guess a halfway housing where you live on the base and there's medical care there if you were to need it, but it's not a hospital room or setting. It's kind of like a big hotel. We did a small transition out of the military, but I definitely was not prepared for what was going to happen next.
I'll just put some lips on and then I'll be ready to go. All right. You get to see me put my lips on, even though this color is hard on my lips, I don't even know. The experience of being in the military itself, what I had to do was easy for me. Dealing with some of the things that came into my life, that were experiences I had to endure, was not always easy. I grew up with mostly women. I lived with my mother, but my grandmother was like always there because she lived close by. And my mom and my grandmother were very close. So we spent a lot of time between grandma's house, my mom's house, church, and school, and that's pretty much it. Good job. If I just wasn't so fine. I needed to figure out what I was gonna do. I didn't think I was interested in college at the time, but I already become a teen mom. So I wanted to take care of my baby. I didn't want my mother to have to do that. My girlfriend had gone in the Navy. She was driving a school bus and was talking to me about going in the military. She says, well, what are you gonna do? Because I think I was a junior or something. It wasn't until I went to her house and I saw her white uniform laying on the bed. I was sold. And I went home and told my mom I'm going in the Navy because I like their uniforms. And my mother looked at me like, what? Because you like, yep. I didn't need anything else. So I'm supposed to act normal. Whatever the heck that means. Well, there were no men where we were in boot camp, necessarily where we lived, but when we marched and did those things, we had a brother company that would accompany us. I had no idea that once you got out of boot camp, all of a sudden you'd be the only or a very small group of, depending on where you ended up. That was like, where are the girls at? Initially, I was in aviation where there was actually a lot of women at my first duty station. But when I went to A school, it was primarily men, of course. I meet this Marine. I didn't know initially that he was stationed across the street from us because I was a Navy. He was a Marine. I didn't understand any of that. Just got there, maybe a couple months earlier. And then unfortunately, my first major trauma happened. This particular evening, we were gonna go out and we had a girlfriend that lived off site. So we're gonna meet at her house and we're gonna go on a date, and then it turned kind of ugly. He got very aggressive with me and decided he wanted to have relations with me physically, and I didn't want to, and he forced me. Once it happened and it was kind of over with, he left that night and he literally didn't contact me anymore until I contacted him about 2 months later because I found out I was pregnant. He says, okay, well, I'll take care of it. He contacts me within probably 2-3 weeks later and takes me to his duty station. They had us go into this room and there were 5 men sitting there, I'll never forget. They have us stand at attention in front of them, and then they tell me, how dare I be pregnant, and that I'm trying to ruin his career. I remember being like I was moving outside of my body because it's like, do you not know what happened with this situation? And they weren't even entertaining conversation. They pretty much said, we're giving you a direct order to have an abortion. Okay. And I remember at the time saying, well, what if I don't have an abortion? And he said, oh, that's what you're gonna do. It didn't even dawn on me that I would even face anything that might affect the rest of my life when I went in the military. I went in because I wanted a career and I wanted to go to college, and, you know, military pay, they did pay for all of that, so that's what I went for. But the military is not designed for that. They're designed for the mission. So that anything that needs to be sacrificed for the mission is the only thing that matters. And that's unfortunate because there are real people there. A few months went by because at that time, you couldn't have an abortion without the baby being a certain amount of gestation. You couldn't do it very, very early. He picked me up in a government car, took me to the clinic right there on Little Creek Road. Nobody's going through this with me, it's just me. That particular day, I was so grief-stricken, I couldn't even speak. So I went to the barracks, just bursting in tears and tears and tears. So just all of this stuff began to build up in me immediately. Well, I think about where I am now in my life, that I'm actually going through a transition. There was a time in my life that I didn't think about being a veteran. It's not that I didn't identify in the VA system. It's just outside of that system, there was never a reason to bring it up. Once I kind of started meeting other women who were here in Texas, I found out that there was a lot of women that just didn't identify as veterans, so they didn't have access to any of their benefits. They didn't even know that there were benefits available to them as veterans. And then there was a misunderstanding about what the definition of a veteran was for many women, particularly the older generation, because they felt like that if they didn't go to war, they weren't veterans. Because I remember when I was in the Gulf War, whenever the ship pulled in and we docked in Iraq, everybody got off to do whatever it is we were assigned to do, men and women. So if somebody got hurt, somebody got blown up, whatever, it just was a part of being there. So it's always a mystery as to how media can report that the women are now on the front lines when women have always been on the front lines. And then there are issues, I think, that are different that we deal with, because the Me Too movement is just as serious or more so in the military than it is in the civilian sector, because our lifestyle is primarily men. For the most part, it's great, but there are bad apples everywhere. And they make it hard for us to do what we do, just to be there. Not because we're doing anything wrong, just being there, being a woman is a challenge. And I think it's unfair for people to feel like, well, you shouldn't have went in the military because you knew what it was. Well, I mean, that's not fair either, because the military is an opportunity for everybody. I'm excited about being a part of it. I'm Not Invisible, just because women who served in the military, a lot of times, there's just a little bit of a misunderstanding as to our role. At this point, we should be working together so that we can, work toward the goal, the cause of making sure, again, we're at least acknowledged for what we did, what we have done, and then what we can contribute to our communities now. Because I think what I'm seeing is we have a next generation of young women who could use us, being able to advise them on some things about how to manage themselves inside this culture. Because now we can reach back and look and say, guys, this might help you. This is what I went through and this might help you, kind of thing, But while we're competing, fighting, we can't get anything done, So.
Good luck to the VA.
Thank you. I guess having somebody take an initiative to document our history is important. And again, it's not because I think we need to be separate from the guys and get separate attention. I just think we need to have recognition so it'll become normal for people to think of a woman having been in the military.
Glad you made it safely.
Good, you smell fabulous. Whatever that is you're wearing.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, you look beautiful.
I'm Dorothy Stroud. I'm from Massachusetts, actually, and I'm 97 years old. I was born in 1921. I was the youngest of 7, and I guess I was pretty spoiled. I had 3 older sisters and 3 older brothers, and they took care of me. And in fact, they'd take me to school to show and tell. My father died, and we had to move from a little town and into the city. I was born in Auburn, but I went to school in Worcester. I couldn't go to college. I was one of 7. Right after the Depression, this was back in the 30s, so there was no way. A woman in that days, and where I came from anyway, it was considered a waste of time. When I was 21 in 1942, I was thinking about joining the Army. They had started advertising.
Today, the WACs are serving with the armed forces in every major theater of war.
The first contingent to arrive in Australia gets a real welcome. Reporting for duty half a world away from home, these United States Army women are making a vital contribution to the cause of the United Nations.
And my family, my brothers and sisters all said, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Oh, honey, you don't want to do that. You don't know where you're going to go. You don't know who you'll be living with or who you'll be working with. You don't want to do that. But my mother said, go for it. Where's the photos? I can't find it. I'm really new at this. I'm learning, and it's hard because I can't remember. I feel like a pioneer because it was all so new.
Ms. Stroud?
We had a physical and they evaluated us before we went into training. Then we went to Des Moines, Iowa.
All right, so I understand we're getting you some new hearing aids. So first thing we need to do is do a new hearing test.
Okay.
Make sure that nothing has changed there, and then we can get you some hearing aids ordered, okay?
Okay.
Come on in here.
Part of the training was done at that time with men.
I'm going to put some earphones in your ears. When you hear the beeps, I need you to press this button, okay?
Because there weren't enough women yet available to do this. They were all pretty new, like I was new.
Conservation of manpower is a matter of first importance. The Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was organized to assist in meeting this need by releasing soldiers from non-combat duties. These women are to take over the jobs of soldiers behind the lines and here at home.
Supplies for the new arrivals, everything uniform, from underwear to overcoats.
We were training in men's overcoats because our uniforms hadn't come in yet. And they were just hanging, you know, dragging the floor. But it kept us warm.
I'm all bummed. Well, up and through, then down and through.
We were living in stables, but it was clean.
On the double!
Everything had been removed and it was just bedding. It was all open. And everything was very, very, very strict. I learned to really be organized. Believe me, I am, and I still am. I'm still organized.
I had a friend here that we'd made the jewelry together. And she would get so angry with me because she was so slap happy, you know, everything was thrown around and I was so organized. She used to say, I wished I could be like you. And I said, no, you don't.
Okay, we're gonna put this in your ear, okay? You may not be able to hear at all with this in your ear.
That's okay. I've done this before.
The quartermaster set us up with the quantities of things that men used. But we were women. You know, and it became a problem, especially toilet paper. We were always running out of it. And so finally they had to go to the headquarters and raise a lot of fuss that we needed more supplies.
Wax on review. Basic training finished for another class. Wax, fit, alert, proud of their corps, prepared for the next big step in their new life, ready to serve with the Army, to do the jobs the Army thinks they do best.
I didn't know I had a New England accent. I didn't know I had an accent. You know, everybody where I live talked like I do. But this woman, one of the recruits, was following me around in the PX one day. After that was over, the next morning I was at the sink getting ready to go get dressed, and she was beside me, and she said, "You're the lady from the PX?" And I said, "Yes." She says, "You talk just like Mrs. Roosevelt." She was following my accent. At that time, the Air Force was part of the Army. So I was in the Air Force part of the Army.
From training centers and specialist schools to every part of the United States to take over permanent assignments. Wax on the move, into the field, all of them, to take over the duties for which they have been trained. Self-reliant, self-sustaining units, trained to settle quickly in new quarters to get down to their job without delay.
I was a clerk typist, so that's what I got into. Some of the women got into kitchens and some drove trucks. But other than that, there wasn't a heck of a lot, you know. From Des Moines, Iowa, they sent me back to Boston. And we set up a system of aircraft warning. They had big charts, big tables, and every time an airplane came on in the area, we plotted it. And we stayed there about 6 months and trained civilians to do this. From there, I went to Orlando, Florida. It wasn't Disneyland, and it was just plain Orlando, Florida. It was a little air base. It was great. I loved it there, but I decided I wanted to go overseas, so I volunteered for Europe. And I got it. And then I had to take additional training where we learned to shoot and to put a rifle together again and all this stuff that I never had to do because I was working in a headquarters, you know.
Thousands of WACs volunteer for overseas duty, eager to serve in the actual theater of operations, the goal toward which they've worked and trained.
I crossed the Atlantic Ocean in 1944 on the Queen Elizabeth. She's the sister ship to the Queen Mary. And we were unescorted, and we zigzagged across the ocean to miss the U-boats. And it was 5 days and 5 nights of terror. And we landed in Scotland. And we came down through Scotland into some place in the Midlands of England. I don't remember the name of the town. I don't know if I even knew it because everything was so restricted. There was no street signs, no county town signs because of the possibility of invasion. We stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks waiting for transportation to France. When I went to overseas training, they cut my orders early and I was there 2 days before I was needed. And another woman was in the same situation, and we 2 of us were roaming around in this great big empty barracks. Her name was Gates. I called her Gatesy. She called me Dryden. That was my last name at the time. And she went on the ship with me. We went to France together, and we worked in the same office.
But the English Channel, we just did it overnight. We'd get on it. It was everyone. It was really hush-hush. We didn't know what time we were leaving from. It was rough. The channel was really rough. But we got along. We got fine. JC and I, we were buddies. When we were on the beachhead, they weren't expecting us, so they didn't have anything ready for us. So we had to sleep on the ground until they got stuff. It was raining, and it was cold, but we passed it up. Every night we'd just take our shoes off because they were so muddy, you know. On the beachhead, they took us over to a outside kitchen for a hot meal one time. And while we were standing around waiting, one of the cooks came up to me and he said, "Would you like a helmet of hot water?" I said, "Oh boy, would I ever." I'd rather have the hot water than the food. So he gave me a helmet full of hot water, and Gacy got one too, and we scrubbed up a little bit. And they took us to this beautiful hotel in Paris, and we walked in and we were a mess. And there's these women all sitting there and their brass buttons all polished, you know, and their shoes all polished, and we walked in looking like drags.
I was adopted at the age of 10, so that changed my life. The gentleman that adopted me, he was a Marine. That kind of planted the seeds of what our country and our government was all about. It was something that I was living. So I became a Girl Scout. In between church and school and the Girl Scouts, the Girl Scout thing stayed with me the rest of my life. One of my first projects as a Girl Scout was candle making. There was lots of camping, walking trails. Of course, then we learned how to pitch camp and tents and campfires, how to do a safe campfire. Wow. And for my 16th birthday, they took me on a tour across America. We hit every state except for Alaska and Hawaii. Feels like energy coming from this tree. Wow. Years and years of wisdom from this tree. It was a lot going on at that time. JFK was president. The Beatles invaded America. Governor George Wallace of Alabama at the time declared segregation for the whole state of Alabama. Dr. Martin Luther King did his I Have a Dream speech. A lot of things were being stirred up at the time in 1963.
At the present time, it is of paramount importance that the women and girls of our country be given training so that they may do their share in the war emergency. In the past 6 years, the National Youth Administration has done much to broaden opportunities for American youth. Today, it is broadening opportunities for service in the training of thousands of young women for war work.
President Kennedy established a presidential commission on the status of women, and he appointed Eleanor Roosevelt as the commission president, and she was 79 at the time. I was at UCLA. I was in my 5th year of med school when the female recruiters came to our campus. They were interviewing a lot of the female students, and they had a list of names, and my name was on that list. The Vietnam War was going on at the time. It just didn't occur. That was why we were being recruited, because they needed women. At the time, women were nurses or administrators.
All over the world, wherever our troops are stationed, the Army nurse is an ally of the soldier in his battle against sickness and pain. Her words of sympathy and understanding can be as important and valuable as his skill and knowledge. Both are required if she is to really fulfill her role as an Army nurse.
Maybe 9 months up the road, they sent a bus to campus to pick us up and take us to the MEPS, to the Military Processing Center. So we were called WASP, the Women's Air Force. The WAF and the WACs, they were actually fully enlisted. Even though they were officers, they were called enlistees. They didn't distinguish anything different like they do today. My first assignment was 99th Combat Support Hospital in Westover Air Force Base, Springfield, Massachusetts.
Lift. 1, 2, OTD! Jody has it all. Jody has it all. Jody's on the ball. Jody's on the ball. Who's got it? Jody's got it. Who's got it? Jody's got it. Sound off. 1, 2. Sound again. 3, 4. Bring it on up. 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, 4 up. Bring it on down now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4.
Living quarters was our headquarters. Our assignments were given to us from what we call WAF unit. All the men are at war, and they're waking us up and telling us that we had snow removal detail and we had to plow the city. But this is the kind of things that we women did. We actually ran the bases and supported the cities. It was a lot of pressure on us to keep things going. They were rotating women at the Combat Support Hospital. I didn't know when my time was going to come, but it did. And that first deployment was to Korat Air Base in Thailand. Out in the field, we had a MASH unit, but we actually had hospitals to transport them from. They were brought in from the combat zone to the MASH unit, from the MASH unit to the hospitals, different hospitals in Thailand.
Hi, Rhonda, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, thank you.
Can I help you?
I'm here to see Dr. Pat Ryan.
Okay, I'll let her know you're here.
Okay. When there was a call for us to take the medevac to go into the combat zone to actually pick up the wounded, pick up the dying and the dead, we took turns. So it was always about 12-hour shifts.
Hi, how are you?
I actually did a lot of, when I say bagging and tagging, you know what I mean. It's something you never get out of your head. The things that you see, you hear, you smell.
The thing that was interesting to me as a member of the Army Nurse Corps is that there was a real respect for rank and who you were, regardless of what your profession was. And so, you know, nurses in the military, we were tight.
The men and women who become Army nurses may be student nurses or graduate professional nurses who have had hospital experience. To each, the Army Nurse Corps represents the epitome of the nursing profession. Here, a career in the Corps can span a lifetime of rewarding service and adventure in foreign lands.
Even though I had an MD behind my name, the male entity would only allow the females in the military to do so much. The MD and the doctor is supposed to be for the men only. For our particular 99 Combat Support Hospital, there was a dozen of us, and we were all given specific jobs to do. My war skill specialty was medical administration.
There was a lot of shenanigans that went on that, was men thinking that they could take advantage of women in those settings.
They tried, but we had a code and a system where we protected one another because a lot of times we were outnumbered 100 to 1, kind of thing. So we were sent out in teams, not individually during Vietnam. I was actually there 1 year and 2 months, only because of the hospital duties. I guess the last 6 months of my combat tour was when the war was coming to an end. I had the heart for it, but not the stomach. I kind of left the medical field after Vietnam.
I got out of the military, I lost contact with everyone. I went home and fell into a deep depression and became best friends with my pain meds. I got really addicted to them.
We have a tincture as well. So it's going to be a little more potent than the shot. Instead of doing the shot, you would do 1 to 2 of the droppers sublingually underneath.
I went to the VA for help, and instead of helping me, they just took me off of them. So I went to the streets to find pain meds, and I ended up isolating from everyone, and that turned into even a stronger addiction of heroin. You said 1 to 2 drops of this?
It's the dropper. You'll do a full dropper. I would start out with 1 dropper sublingually. You can hold it 1 to 2 minutes under the tongue, and then once you're finished, you can just swallow the excess. But that helps it to get into your bloodstream a bit quicker, so it should help with that pain relief.
Okay, I'll just do 1 of each. I just was headed to prison. The same freedom that I fought for, I was about to lose to this addiction. I used to be a strong soldier, and now I'm in jail as a heroin addict. And I didn't know how to come back from that. I wanted to change, I just didn't know how to change or where to begin. I wrote my congressman, Jody Heiss. He got a hold of the VA and assigned someone through the VA to help me get into drug court and get into a drug rehab program instead of going to prison. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Oh, no problem. Have a good one.
When you're in addiction, you don't really care about anything, and you definitely don't want an extra hasslement of having to worry about putting on this prosthetic and staying fit and the pain, and it was new and just I wasn't really mentally present for it. I was just really ready to walk again, so I really didn't care what it felt like or anything. The old socket was so hard. I would sit lopsided, it would hurt your back. Your leg would actually lose feeling in it because it was so hard. Tastes like herbal tea. And I only did like 3 little drops because I'm scared. So I just slowly never walked again. This is going to help with the pain of wearing a prosthetic because I haven't worn one since I overcame that addiction of pain medications, and I absolutely refuse to ever take pain medications again. So I've gone to all natural remedies for pain, and I will definitely continue to experiment with them until I find one that works, because I know I will. I have calluses on my hands from using crutches. They're always falling and they're always in the way. And when I get in the vehicle, I have to have somewhere to put them. I was actually in Houston. I was like wasting time at the hotel room and ended up doing some research. And you know how the internet, you look up one thing and you end up looking at 10 other things. And I found Martin Bionics, and I remember telling my mom, like, I've got to have one of these sockets. It will change my life. I was actually leaving Houston and I was saying bye to Valerie, and she asked me what I was up to or what I was going to do now. And I said, oh, I'm about to get a hold of Martin Bionics and reach out to them, write them an email and see how I get one of these sockets made. And in passing, she was like, well, give me the contact information and I'll write them. And so I did. I didn't really think much about it again.
Welcome back to Great Day. We are back with Sergeant Kendra Lou Garza, who's overcome addiction to pain pills and heroin after losing her leg serving in Afghanistan. Valerie James was homeless at one time after serving in Afghanistan as well. Today, she works with Mental Health America of Greater Houston as a veteran peer services coordinator. We also have amputee advocate Tom Allred, who's lived with prosthetic legs for over 57 years. All right, before the break, I asked, what was your coming to Jesus moment where you had to decide, am I going to live or die?
And he sat down beside me and I was like, oh, cool. His shirt says Martin Bionics. You know, what's the odds of that happening? You know, I still didn't register that he was there from Martin Bionics.
What would a difference of something like this, like a Martin Bionic prosthetic that you could be comfortable with, that you don't have to necessarily switch back and forth from your crutches, what would that mean in your life?
Oh, it would change my life. It would give me independence back.
Yeah. The tough thing, of course, is that money is an issue on these things. These are
definitely
not cheap. No. But can you tell her why that she does not have to worry about that money, Tom?
Well,
Oh my God.
Yay!
You don't have to be jealous anymore because you are getting a new leg, compliments of Martin Bionics.
Wow.
Everybody's excited about this. Everybody was like, don't stress about anything, just focus on the trip. And so I didn't.
I've hit so many blocks this year trying to reach out to try to figure out a way to get more awareness for women veterans, and there was just, they were astounded.
No support at
None. None.
That's like why I get such a crazy look when they find out, like, you know, I'm a female vet that got injured in combat. They're just like, holy shit.
They're just jealous because they
like,
don't do
wow,
it.
they really do. It's almost like an aha moment for them. Like, wow, they really do serve.
Right, and she must really be strong.
Yeah,
Sure.
because in the military, you're constantly having to prove yourself as a
Always.
woman. You know, you're always being compared to the man, and so you have to go above and beyond what's expected of you to make sure you're not looked down upon or, you know,
Or
labeled
looked
as
over.
a weak symbol.
Yep.
Yep.
It's a daily fight.
That's
Or
like your
in a-
one way out.
Right.
I'm really in Oklahoma City about to get this awesome socket made. So it was very surreal.
When you think about veterans, you typically think of men because men, they show who they are, much more than women do.
She's doing it right now.
I joined the Air Force in 1980. I was a linguist, and there were actually quite a few women that were at the language school the same time that I was. And a lot of the women that I was actually at the language school with went with me to Korea.
Please have me. Yes. You have more of these? Yes.
I was in for 4 years. And when I got out, I didn't know about benefits or services, and nobody had ever communicated that there were any benefits or services aside from your VA benefit to buy a home. But other than that, I didn't know about the VA or even if those services were available for women back then. And I didn't even ask. I didn't even know to ask. I just kind of said, okay, I'm out, and I went about living my life. In 2010, when I was getting my MBA, there was a medically retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who was in my cohort. And we were talking, and she said, well, you're a veteran. And I'm like, well, yeah, I don't know about that. And she's like, no, you served. I said, yeah, from 80 to 84. I said, it was a long time ago. And she's like, don't do that. And I was like, don't do what? And she's like, you served. You made the decision to sign on the dotted line, and you gave 4 years of your life to your country. You can call yourself a veteran.
Appreciate your service.
Thank you. There are so many women veterans like myself who have dismissed their service when they shouldn't have.
Pictures, Women's Army Corps.
Yeah. There's a large part of the population who have family members who never served, and so they're not as aware that women serve. There's a lot of misconceptions about the things that women are capable of doing and how much influence that women have had because of their military service. And if you think about the women's right to vote, a lot of that was driven by women who served during World War I. We played such an important part in history, and I just think we have to keep the momentum going, especially if women are going to get services. If they're going to get services, why would you assume that they're the spouse? Why not just assume that they're the veteran?
She'll be there to take me. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm a Navy veteran as well.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad to see somebody else in the
Absolutely. When were you in? Like
52, in the 50s.
Oh my God, what did you do? From the time I got out to maybe 10 years ago, I had no tear, no nothing, no emotion about anything. It was happening on the inside, but there was no outward display, nowhere to share that. And I think, some of that is what contributed to the fallout with my husband, because I just didn't have anything to share because I was isolated in my own head. I probably could have been more motivated to heal and really do had it just not been. I just hate this. I just hate my life.
Hey, Virginia, we're going to do a group photo.
Are you taking my friend?
I am.
We're just connected.
Central Texas.
With Navy veterans here.
I know.
I'm in counseling now. They give me an appointment with a gentleman that's over at the VA, and he diagnosed me with military sexual trauma, PTSD/military sexual trauma. And then he stayed with me for a few years, and then he transferred me over to the vet center. He felt like I needed to take the next step. Now, I'm still taking next steps because I haven't gone through all the things that they think would be my therapy and all that stuff, but at least I've been willing to be open to it.
You haven't seen the organ plan? No. Look at this. Look at this. This is what we gonna look like. No. That's organs. Okay. So when he did the whole body shot, he's gonna put all of us in line like this. Okay. So look, my little Edie Gourmet necklace. I'm gonna
be in there. Yes.
I read all about their things. Some of them talk about their medals they got. Some of them talk about their experience. Some talk about whatever. Okay. So it's whatever you want to add.
Oregon. I'm gonna have to check it out. Okay, so, and I'll see if I can get another state involved. Let me find out how do I do that.
That'd be cool.
So he said some words to me that I will never forget. He said, Romaine, just because you need support does not mean you're weak. Wow. And that made it okay for me to let him talk to me about my life. You know what I mean? It just made it okay. Oh, God, it made it okay. Because I'm not weak. I'm not, I just have been through some things that I didn't do to myself. Somebody else did that I've had to pay for a long time.
Thank you so much. Well, of course, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here.
Some more, so give me words to depart with.
Words to depart with. You're beautiful. Thank you for being part of our campaign. I am not invisible, and I'll see you at the reception
March
27th.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You all are amazing. Thank you all so much.
Good to see you, Vitamin. Thank you so much.
Good closing.
did that. I used to decorate cakes.
She did. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We
share lots of things.
That was one of my hobbies years ago.
Wow, see?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank
very
you.
beautiful
Looks
lady
just
on there.
like me.
Is it something you'd like to do to share your story?
You know, I never talked about it until I saw the 50th anniversary of the D-Day landing.
Yes.
Well, I did that. About 2 months later, I landed on Omaha Beach.
I had a backpack on, I had a helmet on, and boots. I had to climb down the side of a ship on a rope ladder, and I landed down into one of these little landing ships that they took me into the shore, the front limped down, just like they did on D-Day with the men. I did that.
So you paved the way for all of us.
Yeah.
For what you did and for everything that you went through.
There was people there before me, but there weren't many, you know.
Right.
And when I got there, I realized where I was. It was Omaha Beach. And I looked around and all the bunkers were still up there. And I thought, how in heaven's name did these men do it? You know, there was such a little shoreline. It was very short. Thousands got killed. Yeah, it was awful.
Paris was free by then. That's how I got over there. Paris got free. Then they started bringing the women in.
We were the headquarters for the depots that were spread out in France and Belgium. And we provided ammunition and weaponry to the troops. I was there when the Battle of the Bulge, when they tried to take us back. I got the Dakota Gear thanking me for helping to free them. I thought that was kind of neat.
I've had a lot of experiences.
Miss Dorothy, can I ask a question? What was your proudest moment?
My proudest moment?
Proudest moment.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. When was my happiest moment?
Yeah, or even your happiest
When they
moment.
turned the lights on back in Paris.
It was July 14th, Bastille Day. The war had just ended. The whole town was open. The lights were on. The fountains were back on. It was a gala time. It was wonderful. The war was over. It was over.
You know, we women have come a long way.
Yes.
We have come a long way.
Yes, we have.
But there's one more thing I want to tell you about all of this. When the troops entered the death camps, they had Signal Corps with them that took pictures just the way it was right then. They asked us to see those pictures so we would never forget and not to let anybody else forget what happened over there. We did. I'll never forget it. It was awful. Can you imagine?
Things that we can only read about in a book.
You don't hear about it anymore.
Right.
But you have to remember it.
Absolutely.
You have to remember it.
At the end of Vietnam, they disassembled the women's military forces. We were no longer a separate force. DOD decided just to consolidate us and put us all under one commander. Some of us had maintained warrant officer ranks, but a lot of the women lost their commission and were converted to the enlisted ranks because they consolidated us with the men.
So as far as the issue of fairness to women, the system we had was always an unfair one. I said so repeatedly.
The Women's Air Force Service Pilots, or WASPs, was organized in August 1943. When the WASPs disbanded at the end of 1944, they had flown 77 types of aircraft, more than 60 million duty miles, and proved that American women were willing to risk their lives in wartime flying assignments. Ironically, it wasn't until 1977 that the Air Force graduated its first group of female pilots, which brought mixed reaction from WASP members.
So it irritated me just a wee bit that the news media didn't get around to admitting that the WASP were indeed first.
Because of the 1956 combat exclusion law, women were still prohibited from being assigned to aircraft that were in combat missions or involved in combat operations behind enemy lines. Modern warfare, with its use of high-tech weapons and surveillance systems, has made distinctions between frontline and other positions almost irrelevant in terms of physical danger.
So it was a little different, a little chaotic, because now we had no more female commanders, we had no more female first sergeants, we had no other females looking after other females. It was like we were thrown to the wolves.
She came out and told us.
Nobody knows what we went through. All of us women, I don't know how the other women were prepared for what they went through. I know how I was prepared. The current women today need to know that we were all female force. It wasn't until after Vietnam where we were given more jobs and more responsibilities, and nurses who had MDs were allowed to be doctors. We were allowed to do more than just type and take blood pressure. We have to break through these barriers.
But the period of talking about those other issues is over. We have a decision made by our National Command Authority, and we will proceed, and we're going to do it better than anybody.
Oh, from the very beginning, 1775. That's the beginning. April 19, 1775. Wow. Wow. The thing around the women's military forces was we called them BAMs. Female women in the Marine Corps were called BAMs. And BAM is acronym for Badass Marines. Hooah! They were tough. There was few of them, but they were tougher than we were. They were tougher than the men. It was a joke to the men. It's, well, you know, if the women want to hang with us, then we'll give them the worst guys to train. You know, I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. I can deal with these guys. They're not going to push me out. You think this is a joke? I don't think it's a joke. These men either have a mother, a wife, daughters, sisters. These guys belong to somebody. This is not a joke to me. To make a long story short, when these guys found out I was leaving the military, they actually said, you got to take us with you. He says, no one else is going to put up with our crap the way you did. And I said, I thought you guys hated me. No. We knew that you cared. We wouldn't still be here in the military if it wasn't for you. We were on our way out. I actually transferred from the Air Force to the Army. At first, I was going to leave the Air Force. I went and sought some assistance on a sexual harassment situation in the Air Force, and I was going to leave, like most of the women. But I said, you know, I'm going to stand and fight, because if this is happening to me and other women and we don't fight it and do something about it, it'll never stop. I transferred branches in order to fight the case against the Air Force. It took 5 years, but I did win the case. I left the military with 25 years of service. 5 years Army, 20 years Air Force.
Well, welcome to Martyr by Onyx. So let's just do a little bit of paperwork just so I can get you in the computer, and then I will round up everybody and let them know that you're here. So we'll just go in this front room in here. Front two. Have a seat there in that comfy chair. Now, are you cold? No, ma'am. Because I got the heater. I've moved it up and down a couple times, so. We are so excited to have you. Cool. So work on that, and then let me go. I think Jay's upstairs, and everybody's going to spread out. So okay. Round them up.
Yeah, we was just sitting in the lobby, and this guy comes walking in, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Jay Martin."
This is Amy and Sierra.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm Kendra.
We've actually met a really long time ago.
Yeah.
I shaped your leg one day. I shaped your butt cheek.
Oh,
specifically.
Yes, I remember you. That's right.
Tablet?
Yes.
Yay, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
You ready to get started? We can always set this to the side and then we'll come back to it.
Okay.
So real quick, when's the last time that you have worn anything? Like
2 years ago.
2 years ago? Okay.
I just instantly got tears in my eyes when I was shaking his hand. It was just real emotional and overwhelming to meet someone else that's made this whole thing come together.
Okay. How did you spray alcohol over this whole thing and then kind of slide into it?
Yeah.
Who made this last socket for you?
Hanger.
Okay.
Hanger in Athens, Georgia.
Okay. Great.
So we have this saying here at Martin Bionics is that we build lives, not sockets. And that is
core to our DNA as a company. As a clinical practitioner in prosthetics, I realized that many of my patients' functional abilities were limited not as much by their amputation as by the lack of technology in the field. Conventional prosthetic sockets are static, they're hot, they're rigid, they're heavy, and can be very uncomfortable for many users. So in creating the socketless socket technology, we're able to create a technology that is more conforming, more comfortable.
The complexity of Kendra's injury makes fitting her prosthetically very difficult. Her limb is very short. She has a large muscle belly to the front. She has a scar line right where a traditional suction socket would need to seal to maintain suspension. The process for making Kendra's socket started just as any other prosthetic process would. We start with a cast of the residual limb. So we have the perfect mold of her limb shape and how it sits on her body in space. And that gives us a good place to start. We got good suspension. There it goes. Okay, have a seat. It takes us a little bit to get it going, so probably about 2:30. Sound good? So you're free to whatever you want to do until about 2:30. Do you want to leave the liner on? You want to take it off and leave it here?
I'll leave it on.
Does it feel good to just have pressure on it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, go for it.
It's a whole new process. All right, we shall return to the room we came before. As an amputee, I had accepted the reality that I would live every day for the rest of my life uncomfortable and in pain. You know, I absolutely loved my X3, my microprocessor knee, but the socket was a completely different story. Thank you for letting me use your shoes.
Hey, whatever, no problem.
They fit good? Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. In a rigid socket, something as simple as tying your shoes is not possible. Something that simple before the socket would cut into my growing area. Just doing your everyday task was so challenging. For one, if you sweat, you lose suction. You have to go to the bathroom, take everything off, pull out your bottle of alcohol, you know, put your liner on, spray it down, push back into it. Now all I have to do is snap a couple of ratchets and it becomes tighter around my limb. So it completely eliminates adding plies, the socks, the alcohol spray, all of that.
Yeah, the back's kind of bunching.
Do you want to take a couple steps? Stay in those bars. One thing that patients always let me know is that how important it is to stand up and look someone in the eye, and being able just to give someone back that basic right is huge, and it means so much to me. So other than it being just a little tall,
it feels really good.
It's a pretty good start?
Yeah, it's a very good start.
Yeah. Have a seat and let's take it off. And then we'll figure out how much tall we are a little bit too. It's probably the best first check socket you've ever had.
It is.
How does it feel sitting?
It's so much more comfortable than the...
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna change a couple things on the back.
Before we take it off, can you bend forward?
Yes.
You bend further?
That is crazy. This right here is like such a big deal. Like you wouldn't be able to do this in a regular socket. I've never worn a Martin Bionic socket. So I had expectations of what it was like to walk in a rigid socket. Yeah.
Too tight? Didn't want to pop you out of there? There you go. Maybe some. Feel like you're in it straight again.
I was expecting to have like pressure points where it was uncomfortable, especially, you know, really high up.
Let me reinforce it just so we make sure it feels more like the carbon's gonna feel, because the carbon's not gonna have that give to it. So I'll reinforce it between now, tonight, and that way first thing in the morning, it'll be ready to go.
Okay.
Sound like a plan?
Yes.
Women who served in the military are masters at compartmentalizing because we have to. We all know what it means to perform whatever your mission is, and you just got to focus on it. At the end of the day, I think all of us need to be working on something as it relates to women moving forward and having success if we serve in the military. That's just the way I see it.
Oh, wow, this is pretty cool. I like that one.
And I think we'll find our best self if we can incorporate who we really are as women into being veterans.
She actually doesn't know what she's doing.
And then being able to acculturate by bringing our mantra of never leaving anyone behind. This camaraderie has opened up for healing for them. I can say for myself, I didn't even know I needed this in my life. That there's other women that think like me, that just get me. And I don't have to be anything different. I don't have to put on a mask. I don't have to add anything. I don't have to take anything away. I can just be me. When I talk to a woman who knows what that world is like, there's some things I just don't have to say, that you get it. When I'm able to just be here with you, I'm able to just be here with you. And that means I'm gaining something and you're gaining something. That's the part that I think we're missing when we come home. Because out there, we're forced to be with the guys, because that's who's there, primarily. When we come home, we start talking with the girls and they say, oh, there's something different about her. Because they don't quite know what the heck she's talking about. Or why is she so plain all the time? Why is she so direct? Or whatever it is that makes us identify differently as women.
That's it. So you got me. Okay, you got me. So hit me up now. Stop playing.
That's what pushes us into isolation, because we really don't fit anywhere.
This exhibit is part of the national campaign, which aims to elevate public awareness for the vital role of women veterans have played in national defense. Further, it encourages all women who serve to identify as veterans and to utilize the benefits that they deserved. The 30 women recognized here this evening represent every conflict from World War II to the most recent war in Afghanistan. They come from all over the state of Texas. Their stories are the history of the past and the beginning of a new era, when every woman veteran can say, I am not invisible, I am a veteran.
I was able to find a connection here. Now, of course, all of us are not going to connect with everybody. That never happens. But everybody connected with somebody. And I think that's why this is so vital, because I think when you feel like you're fit somewhere, that is a part of the process of being able to heal. Beyond counseling, you have someone that recognizes my service, recognizes my sacrifice. Because while we want to be humble about it, what most of us did is a sacrifice. People appreciated that. These women veterans appreciated that. And I can tell by the response even now on our social media, as people are still responding and engaging with us and asking what's happening next. There's an interest that's been piqued. What can we do with this to change the lives of women really?
Things have changed so much since when I went in that I really can't complain. I can't, because when I went in, it was not a career. It was something temporary. There was no thought about staying in and retiring. I came home. I went to school for 2 years under the GI Bill, and then I went to work. I went to work for an advertising agency, and I loved it. It was kind of a crazy place, but it was fun.
Okay, they're on now. How does that sound? Is that
Very loud.
Okay.
Wow, it's loud.
Okay. Is that too loud?
Loud.
Okay.
That's loud. I'd been there a couple of years, and I got a letter, we want you, so I had to go back in. It was for the Korean campaign.
Okay. So you have a cool app on your phone now where you can also adjust your hearing aids from your phone instead of having to reach up behind your ear.
Okay.
Okay.
So where is it?
So it's right here. It's called Hear Max. Okay. You click on that.
First, I went to Okinawa, which is a little island, and it was really very primitive, and it was really in bad shape from the war. Still, and I worked for a G2, which was intelligence.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you, Sonia. And they were just building this up. There wasn't anything. I didn't have a real job. I thought, I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of sitting around. And so the WAC staff advisor came over to inspect us.
I want to go through some of your photos. Tell me about these.
Oh, tell you? Yeah. Well, this is my typewriter. I didn't do any of the work. I just handled all the paperwork, so I knew everything that was going on.
Oh.
It was kind of fun.
I bet.
And this is part of the women that I worked with at G1. And the woman in the center is WAC staff advisor for that section. She's the one that visited me in Okinawa and asked me what I was doing there, and if I was happy, and I said no, I didn't have a job that I enjoyed. And I said, but if I was in Japan, I'd fill up a full tour.
And 2 weeks later, she called me and she says, pack your bags, I got a job for you. So I went to Japan. We worked in a building that was a replica of the Pentagon. It was fabulous, and it was loaded with generals. Believe me, it was loaded with generals. Every department had a general head, even mine, you know.
This is General Peplow. He was our chief at 8th Army Headquarters in Japan.
Okay.
Up until that time, I had a colonel, and so they brought him in, and just in time to give me an award.
Oh, well, okay, good. I love this picture. Tell me about this one. I love this.
I love this picture, yes. I had a civilian man working with us. I can't remember what he did, but I think he was a Jeep driver, and he had a little girl who was coming up with a birthday. And he asked me if I would buy her a birthday cake, because they'd never had one.
They're so darling.
Uh-huh.
I put in 5 years on my second enlistment.
After I got home and got out of the service, it was in the past, you know.
Do you feel like you're a veteran?
Yes.
Have you always felt like that?
Yes, because I've done a lot.
You have, but you never talked about it.
Well, I didn't because no one else did. But really, I've talked about it more since I've been here. Some of the women there got onto the fact that I was military, especially Joe, our friend, you know.
Right.
And so I just told them what was going on, how it had been for me, you know.
There we go. I've always been able to make friends and do things. I've always kept kind of busy. I like crafts, you know, and I read a lot.
Years ago, we had a craft room, and Joe and I went up there one day and started making bracelets. They were really old, cheap beads, but they were kind of fun. And some of the residents would come by and say, well, will you sell them?
Look at this.
Oh, wow. So we started buying better beads, and I got a hold of them catalogs, and we started having sales. I'd open up at 9:30, and we were sold out by 2:30. We put that money to use.
Isn't she pretty?
That's gorgeous.
Uh-huh.
It took us a while to build up enough money to put that library in, because we had to buy all the bookcases. We had to put about $1,000 worth of lighting up in the ceiling.
See, I change it every week. People look forward to see them. I'm doing kittens right now. Okay. Golly, here I made up jewelry here for years. We kept busy every day. It kept me young. It kept me young.
I stood firm. I fought my case and set precedents for other women to be able to fight their own case.
Yeah.
Today's cell phone, solid steel. They don't make them like this anymore.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's not bad.
They approached me about the memorial in the 80s. A few of us who did go to combat as nurses who were out in the field, we started doing fundraisers and asking for help doing a memorial because we didn't want to be forgotten.
It wasn't a popular war. It wasn't a war that made us popular at all. And a lot of people don't think it was just because the fact that they don't understand. In that time, no one thought it was a just cause, but having been there and having been in the midst and have gone back to see what I can do to help, yes, our cause was just.
I was notified that they wanted to use my face image as one of the faces in the memorial. They decided to do that because of the fight I put up with trying to do something about the problems with sexual assault, sexual harassment against women in the military. took us about a good 10 years. So from about 83, 84 to 93, it came out of our own pockets. We paid for the memorial ourselves. Once women get together and unite and stand firm, I think that they can elevate us, and that's what we need. We need to be elevated. We got to know who we are as an American first. You got to be strong. You have to be confident. It comes from here. I think women can do anything they put their mind to. When we planted that seed in doing the Women's Vietnam Memorial, we took the leadership role, hoping that others would follow. And I'm just one person. However, it only takes one spark to start a wildfire. They actually use images of a lot of us. If you ever go to Washington, D.C. to see the Women's Vietnam Memorial, I'm the one that's looking up to heaven. We female veterans have a gift. Don't hide that gift. Don't shy away. I have no contacts with any of the women that I knew from Vietnam. I don't know where they are now. I don't know if how many more of us are still alive. But we need to unite to make us strong. When we talk about the Time's Up movement or Me Too movement, the female veteran still is not heard. If you told them you're a Vietnam vet and they say, yeah, right, we've been invisible too long.
Today's the day.
It is.
I'm so excited. Super excited.
Hi, you hear something to me. Didn't you? I think I said amazing. Your first picture was amazing.
All right.
Oh,
There it is.
Here it is.
All right, I gotta take these blue jeans off.
That's okay. You're all the way in.
So whenever I first stood up in the socket, it was kind of like, okay, just like, I can't really even explain it because it was so comfortable.
I know, I'm gonna cry.
Do it. You do it. You can cry all you want.
It's been like years since I walked.
It's okay. It's okay. Come here. Oh, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you all so much.
You've had a journey for sure.
I am standing for female veterans, and representing female veterans to show everybody hey, female veterans out there kicking just as much ass as males, doing the same exact thing, plus holding a house down, doing all the responsibilities of a mom. I mean, there's some hardcore females out there. I live in the country. The ground is not even. Dustin! Y'all want to walk down to the lake room? Yes, sir. One thing I've realized about the socket is even when you're walking on uneven ground, it gives way. And so whenever I do walk over a bump, it keeps me secure. And I know that I can just continue on going forward. It's gonna be fine.
Not with mine, because she's gonna jump it up a lot. There's that baby. Come on, Snuffy. Whoever they come up there. Just scoop it out there. They say partners for life.
Now that I'm walking, especially in this Martin Bionic socket, some future goals I have is leading by example and really showing other amputees, especially veterans, that there is a better option out there.
Boat ramp.
I know a lot of vets are very active, and this fits right in. And to everyone that has came together, I can't even begin to express my gratitude. Austin, will you go grab my flag your daddy had made for me off the desk? This experience has changed my life. Now I see a bright future. Thank you. So I definitely want to say thank you to Martin Bionics, to the team out in Houston, to the women veterans who have all came together to make this possible.
You need help? Jump. You on there? Okay. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, you can do it now, right? Push your legs out. You know how to do it. Put your legs really high. There you go. Well, with Women Veterans Day, I think the most important thing that we're trying to get is awareness that women serve, and some of the issues that we have are different from what men have of being in the military. And just to be able to acknowledge the sacrifice that women make that is very specific, I'll say, because of the family and how we deal with our children. Bringing good awareness to that, I think, is going to be important, because it enables people or organizations in the VA to be able to know how best to approach care for us, or resources for us, and how to develop what may not be out there now. So I think that's a big deal. Now I'm gonna let you do it for a while. Let me see you do it. Stick your legs out, come on, real big. There you go. Real big, your legs way out there, way out there. Then I think, because unfortunately there's a stigma that goes with sometimes with women being in the military because of the culture, because military changes your viewpoint of how you handle pretty much everything. So if you're in the military for any extended amount of time, your process for living is very different. My baby might be a military girl one day, I don't know. I guess going through the counseling has caused me to kind of do some looking inward at myself and my life and the people in my life that matter. And with that, I visited my mom. And I didn't realize how being in the military kind of took me from my mom. And I just don't know a lot about my mom because I left when I was 17 years old and I haven't been back. Can you go all the way to the top? Girl, be careful, watch your head. Watch your head. Annalise, girl, you are a big girl. Oh my goodness. Girl, look at you. I went home and somehow I discovered that she had gotten older. Like, it's like it shocked me because I'd been home to visit, but I never really was home to pay attention to my mom and how her life had changed and how home had changed. Because home is basically the same, but mom had changed. Yeah, you could do it. And then you can hold on to that and climb over there. We're alike in a lot of ways, and I am learning things from my mother, and I'm just stunned when she says she's learning things from me. Right here, right there, and then go up. Go ahead. And I think one thing my mom asked me one time, she says, you've done so many things and been so many places, and you just do whatever you want. She said, have you ever been afraid? Now hold on, up there. Hold your hands up there, and now go that way. Now you can step right over there. See? And I thought about that for a second, and I said, well, yeah, but I want to do it anyway. So, because, somewhere along the way, again, leaving home at 17 and going through all the things I've been through, I don't think there's nothing that I can run up on these days that I'm afraid of. Some things I just have gotten old enough and mature enough to realize I don't need to get involved in, but fear is not the reason. It's usually because either I feel like I can't contribute or this is not contributing to me. And I'm learning something else about myself because I didn't realize that I needed it. I needed the therapy of slowing down, the therapy of looking inside and being able to figure out who I am on the inside, who I am without all the things that I do. Because the military is about doing, performing, getting things done, a mission. So now my mission is to get to know me and my mom, and I think it's going to be a great outcome. And I would encourage anybody that ever comes to that, particularly those of us who have been away from our families, to look back every now and again and see if there's something over there that you can glean from or give back to, So that's just where I am today. And I think all of what we've done has helped me get there, so.
I thought at the time it was essential to go. Boy, it's a long time ago.
I met this lady, a Hispanic lady, and she is a general That would have never happened way back when I first entered the military. So things are looking good.
I tell you, I stood next to my sisters when they were looking at the Women in the Military stamp. And I thought, if only I could be one of those women that make a difference.
Not only on myself, but my kids, and then anybody that I meet. I try to make a difference in their lives.
Depending on what we've been through in the military, we transition past like it didn't even exist. We blot it out. But yet when you see us together, coming together and talking, it's like the happiest moment anyone's had in a very long time. It brings all that back, and it brings back a sameness and a saneness.
You feel like you're the only person that's going through, and you're not. And as long as we band together and put our hands together and figure out like how to help each other, we will.
Come with us. Let me show you where you can go and have community. Let me show you where you can go and have support, because it's amazing to be able to be around other women.
It's important that the generations to come will see the sacrifice and the hard work that women before them put in to make sure that women veterans are honored and not forgotten.